Welcome to the Carlito Monroe Show. I'm your host, Carlito Monroe. Before I get started today, I'm going to go talk about, I got my social media, different things at the bottom. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You'll be the first to know when there's new content. Instagram, follow the show on Instagram. Follow me on TikTok. And hit the Cash App, $1, $2, whatever you want to give would be fine. It'd be appreciated. Shout out to truck drivers. Man, without them, we wouldn't have the things we need on our shelf and just transportation in general. So anytime I see a truck driver, I feel like I got to go thank them for their service, just like thanking somebody who's in the military or something. So I think that's important to shout out to truck drivers. But what I want to talk about today was I'm not going to do any entertainment news or anything today. I guess it'd be more of a story time, just a personal story that I thought about the other day, and I thought I'd figure I'd do my show on it. I guess it's a thing about, well, I'll say this. It was my first time, basically my first lesson on getting what you pay for. You know, you hear this all the time. You get what you pay for. If you don't pay much for something, you don't get much. If you pay a lot, you get better. And there's cases where that's not a hard and fast truth. You know, there may be some situations you may pay a lot for something and don't get much of anything. You know, like I'm a firm believer, which my opinion doesn't make a difference, but I'm a firm believer that majority of the rappers that have these diamond crusted chains and necklaces and stuff, I don't believe that's real. And they may pay 30, 50, 100,000 for a chain, but I don't think it's real. I think the people that's doing the diamonds or whatever, or, you know, tricking them, you know, making them think that they're real and they're not. So I don't think they're getting what they pay for. It seemed like that amount of diamonds would be way more than the amount of money that they're paying for it. But again, I don't know. I just feel like they're not getting what they paid for it. But, you know, there's some cases where it doesn't work like that. But majority of the time, you get what you pay for. If you pay for a pair of Walmart shoes, more than likely your feet are going to be hurting in a matter of weeks. And the threading on them are going to tear apart. It's just how it goes. You get what you pay for. You don't pay much for it. You don't get much. You may go pay, $150, $200 for some Nikes, but then they may last a long time, especially if you take care of them. Like, I'm a big shoe person, so I'll buy shoes, and every time I wear them, I don't think 24 hours gets by without me wiping them off, cleaning them up, spraying something on them, and put them on the shelf. So I still have shoes from the 90s that I can still wear that still look brand new. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that you get what you pay for. But at this time, when I learned my first lesson on that, I want to say I was 18 or 19. And where I'm from, I grew up in the hood. So where I'm from, to have a Cutlass Sierra was a big deal. It was a two-door Cutlass. I think mine was a 83 or 84. I forgot what year. It was somewhere in there. They looked the same. But and mine was a Brougham, or where I'm from, they call it a Broham. Uh, it was real clean. It was real nice. It was white with like a burgundy kind of pad over like the quarter window part. So like my friends and people that knew, it's like, oh man, that's a clean cut dog. That's what they would call it. They would call the Cutlass a cut dog. And then they too, you know, it was two or three of my friends also had Cutlass. And mine was real clean. I have dents, anything. I had bought it from an older Caucasian gentleman that he had to be 80 something years old. He wasn't driving anymore. And he was actually selling it for like 3,500. And I only had 2,000, and he took the 2,000 and let me get the car. So I was happy. It was a 6-cylinder. I mean, it had power, everything. The seats was just like a couch. You know, it's big padded, puffy seats. It was more comfortable to sit in my car than it was to sit at my mom's couch at home. This was a big plush. This was a big plush seated vehicle, but it was a high end vehicle. I mean, considered a high end at the time. I imagine the '84, that thing was pretty expensive. But I loved the car. Everything was great. I had my little job. I was doing my thing. And I remember it was a dude that hustled, this drug dealer guy. He wanted to buy it from me, and he said he'd give me $4,000 for it. And looking, if hindsight, it's 2020, and if I would have knew the situation I was going to end up in, I would have sold it to him. I was like, yo, because I could have doubled my money and possibly just got a different car or even got another Cutlass or whatever. Who knows? But I love the car so much. Like, nah, man, it's too clean. I can't sell it to you. I love this car. So I'm driving the car, everything's fine. And then next thing I know, one morning I'm starting, it's ticking. It's doing a whole lot of ticking. And my stepfather at the time, him and my mother's not married now, but he's my stepfather at the time. He's a mechanic. He's a shade tree mechanic that has a shop, but the shop's not legit. He doesn't have a business license or anything. He had a drug dealing buddy who bought the shop from somebody who had a license and all that. And he was kind of working off of that. But the buddy didn't know how to work on cars. He had my stepfather working there. And then he ended up getting locked up for dope or something. And I think he ended up, after getting out of jail, he ended up dying or getting killed or something. So my stepfather just runs the shop. I'm sure that stuff's not legit. Everything is cash, whatever you do there. But I digress. But he's a mechanic. And he's worked at real shops, dealerships and different things like that. So he's experienced and he knows what he's doing. And but yeah, he had the shop, and then when I had the car, I was like, man, I went to him with the car. I'm like, yo, what is ticking and whatever. And he's like, oh man, that motor's going out. And he was like, Oldsmobile, 6 cylinders. That year or around that time, those motors aren't really good motors. He said if you'd had a V8, which was for Oldsmobile, I think it was 307. He said if you had a V8, you wouldn't have this issue. And I was like, oh man, I got to get a motor. And at the time, to get a motor, I always thought a motor would be $2,000 or $3,000. It took me forever to have that $2,000 because I wasn't good with money. And whatever money I made, I was spending it. I would buy name brand clothes and the guys that was doing boosting or whatever, which I did some boosting at one point too. But, you would just buy the stuff from them. You know what I mean? And I was constantly spending money. Then I had a girl spending money on her too. So you just wouldn't hold much money. So the way I would save money at the time is, whenever I got paid or whatever little money I got, I put it together. I would go to the bank and get $100 bill, and I just kept putting $100 bill in this drawer. And I just put it in the drawer no matter what, because it was a little, you could break 100 in the hood, but it was something that it wasn't a common practice. You didn't take $100 bill and go to the Chinese food place to buy, at the time, $1.25 half order of rice with $100 bill. You just didn't do it. So you could break them, but you weren't too quick to do something like that. So it made it easier to save. So that's how I saved up to $2,000 to get the car in the first place. So for me to have $3-4 grand to get a motor, I'm like, yo, I ain't got that money. I mean, I'm just gonna drive it, let it just keep doing what it does. So it kept ticking and going on and tick, 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 tick. And it was getting louder and louder. And then just one morning I tried to start it. It just locked up. So now I just had this car, motor didn't work. I'm like, yo, this is crazy. So I had to go to work. I called my buddy and he worked at the same place. So I'm like, hey, man, my motor, remember I was telling you about it and locked up on me. It won't even start now. Can you give me a ride to work? He's like, yeah, he had a Cutlass too. So, and his Cutlass was more on the sports side. And it was just a regular Cutlass. It wasn't a Brougham. It was a regular Cutlass, but he had like rally looking rims on it and the white wall, white letter tires. And he had duals put on it with the glass. At the time, glass packs was a big deal. He had the glass pack and had the duals on it. It was the fake duals. It was the single glass pack that split into the two duals. So he had that on there and it made the noise or whatever. So, and it wasn't really all that fast. It was a lot faster than my car, of course, but that was the car that he had at the time. So he swung by, picked me up, and we go to work. And he was like, man, he said, man, he said, you're going to have to go on and get a motor. I was like, yo, motors are like $2,500, $3,000. Because at the time, the place I called was a motor rebuilding place. and they were saying that we can rebuild your 6-cylinder motor for like 1,500 or something. And he said we can rebuild your motor for 1,500, or we can sell you a rebuilt motor, but we don't have any 6 cylinders. We had a V8, and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I said, well, what is the V8 motor? And it was still like 2,300 rebuilt V8 motor, 307. So I'm like, man, I ain't got the money. I guess I got to try to save this up or something. But as soon as the guy told me that on the phone, that was as soon as I wasn't considering it anymore, because I'm like, yo, it'd take me forever to get that kind of money. So when I was talking to my buddy on the way, on the way to work, and he was like, man, he said, nah, man. I'm telling him motors cost that much. He was like, nah, man, you ain't got to do that. He said, my boy Ray, he said he got him for cheap. I say, Ray, who the hell is Ray? And he was like, oh man, Ray over there, they got the tavern. I can't remember the name of the tavern. But he's like, oh, he got the tavern over there and he got the shops over there, man. He said, man, he get you a motor, man, for cheap. And then I'm like, motor for cheap? And I was like, well, what's cheap? He was like, I don't know. He said it was like $100. I'm going to let that sink in a little bit. I talked to the legit place, and they say they can get me a V8 motor for like $22,000, $2,500. My buddy says there's this guy that he can give me a motor for $100. You got to see where this is going. So I'm like, $100? And, you hear the money. You get what you pay for is not something that's ringing in my head at this time. I'm young. I'm desperate. I want my car back on the road. Leading up to this, not leading up to this situation, but after that situation, I would drive my girl car. She had a car she was making payments on, but, she work or whatever. I was driving her car or whatever, but I never felt comfortable with that. There's a lot of guys that do. They feel like, my girl goes to work, I drive around in her car. I don't have a car and I don't have a job. I just didn't have that in me to put everything on the girl that I'm with, because I've always felt as a man, whether we were married or not, that I had to lead the way and I had to have my own. So I didn't like driving her car. There was, like I said, there was guys that was comfortable with that. Like, I got my girl car, I'm gonna drive her car. That's just not, to me, that's just not man stuff. But I mean, that's just me maybe. And I'm sure there's people that feel like I do. But I didn't like driving her car around. I felt like I had to, get my car back going. So they're desperate times with desperate measures, man. I said, man, I might have to see what this Ray guy talking about. So I talked to my buddy. I say, man, can you go with me to this place? Because I wasn't familiar with the area. I wasn't from that particular area where this shop tavern thing was going on. And he was like, oh, I can't go today. I can go another day, but they cool, man. Just going on over there, man. He say ain't nothing gonna happen. You straight. And I'm like, I don't know, man, but so I went on, my girl was with me and she drove me over there. So she drives me to this place. And I had passed by this place many a times, but I never really knew what it was or knew, because it was near a viaduct. Well, growing up, we used to call them viaducts, but it's a viaduct. It's like it went over the train tracks. It's like a little overpass. The road went over the train track. And I used to see this place over there, and I was like, I didn't know what that was. So we go over there, and then there's people out there, and you see somebody messing with brakes or something, or messing with a wheel. Somebody's under the hood. And what really caught my eye was, and it always did for every time I passed by there, and I did used to wonder what was going on over there. There's this tavern on the end, and then there's like 5 or 6 makeshift garages. And what I mean by makeshift is like they just threw some beams up and threw some wood up there and smacked some siding on it, and it looked really terrible. It didn't look sturdy at all, but they would have cars in there, and then they have a cherry picker. And if you don't know what a cherry picker is, it's like usually red, but it can be any color. And it's the chains and the hooks that help lift the motor up out of there, So they had those in there and had some jacks all over the place. And it was just a really shady, sketchy looking place to be having your car fixed or anything done to. But again, desperate times, desperate measures. I was young. I'm trying to get my car running. So, but the main thing that caught my eye, there was these trailers, and there was a trailer that was at the bottom. The windows were broken out of it, but it was a regular single wide trailer. And then there was a trailer on top of that trailer, and the windows were broken out of it. They both looked like two condemned trailers, but they were stacked on top of each other. Then there was a third trailer at the very top, and I assumed that was also condemned. But what stood out was there was some makeshift, again, wooden, steps that were built to kind of zigzag to go up to the door at that trailer at the very top. And I'm like, somebody lived there? It's obvious the two trailers below with windows broken out of it. Nobody's living in those trailers. And there weren't any steps to get to the doors there. Those steps, zigzag, and they went on past those two trailers to go up to the door at the very top. And then once the steps got to the top, it actually it expanded out kind of like a little balcony thing. And they have these long wooden beam stilts to go all the way up there. So somebody lived there apparently. So I came there and I got out, and I'm not a scary guy. I can walk up on any group of people, whatever. I'm not I don't think I'm a threat to them for the most part. At least I don't think like that. So I walk up to the guys and I'm like, "Hey, is it a Ray here or whatever?" Ray, and then they talk like crackheads talk. It's real quick. It's like, "Oh, Ray, yeah, Ray. What you want with Ray?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm supposed to be talking to him about getting a motor." "Oh, yeah. I get him. And he turns around and he just yells up at this trailer for Ray. So this was the summertime. Ray comes out the door of that trailer. He's a real big fat guy. And that's what got me was him being as big as he is, he was comfortable standing on this makeshift contraption of steps that they made. They weren't even, they couldn't have been measuring this stuff. It did not look safe at all. There's no way that was state inspected or county inspected. It was insane. So he comes out on the balcony of that, and then he like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, he want to get a motor. So Ray, he takes his, he's a big dude. He's taking his time. He's in all these steps. He's doing the zigzag, coming on down. He gets down there, and I didn't walk to him. He came over there. He was like, yeah. He says, yeah, you want a motor? And this is kind of a side note. Usually where I'm from, if somebody approaches you and before they say something, they say, yeah. And then they start saying something, they're usually about to do some line or something shady. Usually, just in my experience. But he says, yeah. What you need? I said, I want, a motor or whatever. And he's like, what kind of car you got? This is the crackhead guy. And I said, oh, it's a Cutlass. He said, yeah, we got them. And then Ray said, okay. And I said, I was told it's $100. I mean, I don't know how true it. What does it go for? He said, yeah, 100. This is what Ray said. Yeah, 100. He said 100. I said, $100? He said, yeah. I was like, what? I said, yo, man, and I wanted to just go into questioning, man, how do you afford to do this? This don't make sense. Nah, I'm skeptical, but at the same time, I'm desperate. And that's when I learned my lesson that disparity overpowers whatever the hell's going on. You know what I mean? When you're desperate, you'll overlook all the signs of trickery and whatever. You'll overlook all of that stuff because you're so desperate. For whatever you want. You could just be desperate for a candy bar. If you're desperate for a candy bar, and who knows what you're willing to do. It was like the commercial, what would you do for a Klondike bar? It's kind of that thing. And it seems ridiculous. You see the commercial, like, oh, I'll jump off a mountain, but it's just pointing out that they're advertising selling the ice cream. But the reality of it is desperation overrules everything. And I'm desperate, so I didn't want to go into doing all this questioning about it. And then he just say, well, well, just get out of here then. I don't give you nothing. Or overcharge me. Oh, okay, then I'll charge you $500. And so I didn't want to mess with that. It was a Hondo. We called them Hondos. It was $100. I'm giving him $100 and that's it. So I said, so how does this work as far as the payment go? He said, well, you give me $50 now. He said, we get you in here tomorrow. And you go back there, pick out a motor. He said, you can go back there now, pick out a motor. He said, give me $50. We go pick out a motor and we'll tag it. We'll put that motor in your car and then that's it. And then you give me the other $50 when we're done. I was like, so wait a minute. It's $100 buying the motor and installed. And then he's like, yeah. And I really wanted to be like, nah, man, this don't sound right. You know what I mean? That's what I wanted to do. But I was like, man, I didn't want to mess with it. But I was desperate. So I said, all right, gave him $50. He said, all right. And I want to say the crackhead, they called him Cochise. And it made me think of Cooley High because Cochise got killed. I don't know if you ever saw Cooley High. But anyway, on Cooley High, that guy's name was Cochise. And this crackhead, they called him Cochise. He like, hey, Cochise, show him the selection we got. So I'm following Cochise into this makeshift garages. It's gloomy. I honestly, at this point, feel like I'm about to get knocked in my head. I honestly felt like I was going to get robbed, but robbed, with a gun or hand-to-hand robbed. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what I'm thinking. This is what's about to happen. So I'm like, man, this is crazy. So I go on, I follow in the back, and then Cochise goes through this opening that's towards the alley, which is the back of these buildings and the trailers. It's like an alley, and it was like a dirty, muddy, messed up looking alley. He goes out the alley and then he makes a left. I can't see him now. And then I'm walking up to this opening and I'm hesitant to stick my head out there thinking somebody gonna bust me in the head. So, I start getting on the defense mode, like, what am I do now? Now, mind you, disparity is still overpowering whatever thought process is. I'm still looking at, I'm desperate. So I stop for a second. And I said, well, logically, I need to look to the left because he went to the left. So more than likely, he'd be the guy that would swing and hit me. But while I'm looking to the left, somebody could have already been waiting on the right. So I didn't know what to do. So I kind of just stepped and dipped my head real quick and looked to the left and then dipped back. And then look for maybe something to come across there, maybe a piece of wood or a brick or something. And then I dipped again, but I held it longer and I looked to the right and there was nobody. And I had already seen him further down. So I came on out there and he's like, what you waiting on, man? Pick one of these motors. And I'm not making fun of stuttering people, but that's how the crackhead talked. That's what he was doing. So he's like, pick one of the motors. Pick a motor. And there was like 6 motors on the ground in the alley, leaned up against the building. Now, I've been to a shop, through my years of I've been to a shop where they have the rebuilt motors, where they're usually in a crate or they're on a rack or something like that. These motors were sitting in the mud in the alley. And they looked rusty and they didn't look like they would work. And I'm like, these work? That's the first thing I said. Yeah, they work. I said, what kind of motors are these? He says, they're 350. Them 350s. And what he was saying, they were 350s. And I didn't understand how that worked at the time. I found out later on that 350s were Chevy motors. And those motors weren't Chevy motors. I think maybe one or two of them may have been Chevy motors, but then the other motors may have been Oldsmobile. I don't know what the motors were. But they weren't 350s. They were probably 307s, which was Oldsmobile, and 305, which was Chevy. And I think 4 was 302. But anyway, I didn't know what those motors were. They all look rusty. So logically, the only way to figure out, which one to choose from out of all of it is just to pick one with the least amount of rust. I mean, that's all I had. I wasn't a mechanic, but I could do basic stuff, change brakes, change a battery, little stuff like that, what I helped my stepfather with. So I knew how to do little basic stuff like that, but I didn't know how to pick out a motor. I just figured, okay, the one with the least amount of rust. So I picked the one with the least amount of rust because he claimed they were all 350. He said, that's your motor? Did you want that motor? I said, yeah. So he had a can white spray paint, and then he put a little white dot on that motor, and he said, that's your motor. I was like, all right, I don't, that's it? Yeah, come tomorrow. I said, when do I come tomorrow? He said, bring your car early, drop it off. I said, well, I can't get it to start. I'm going to have to get it towed. So is somebody going to be here? He says, this is the clearest thing I heard him say. He says, Somebody's always here. He didn't stutter or anything. He just said, somebody's always here. So I'm like, all right. So we go back through, go back over. And then the Ray guy says, you get your motor? I said, yeah, he sprayed a white dot on it. He said, yeah, it's tagged. All right. Meanwhile, my girl, she's still in the car. So I go down there, I get in the car. Then she was like, what took so long? I'm like, I'm picking out my motor, and the motor's just in the alley back there. She was like, that motor ain't going to work. She told me that, and I got mad at her for telling me the truth. You know what I'm saying? Well, it wasn't necessarily the truth, but I got upset with her because I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to be all positive. I needed positive energy because I'm not getting what I pay for in this time. You know what I'm saying? I'm getting something good for less. I'm not, this is not the norm. I'm going to win on this one. So I got mad at her. Oh, man, drop me off at home. I don't want to talk to you today. You know, so she drops me off or whatever. I get a tow truck, and I had AAA at the time, which I recommend anybody get AAA. You get so many tows a year, and you ain't got to pay for it, and it's only like $100 a year for the Gold Plus. So get AAA. That's not an ad. It's just what it is. You know, that's what you should do. So I had AAA at the time, and I got my car towed to the shop, and he was right. There was somebody there. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning. Somebody was there, and it wasn't him. He was there, but he wasn't the one that greeted me. He was like, okay, yeah, but put it right here. We'll get it in there. So they just dropped it off in the street, and I guess they were going to push it up in the garage or whatever. I was like, well, how long is it going to be? And he was like, oh, what you getting? I said, well, I got a motor in the alley back there that's got a white dot on it. Oh, yeah. We brought that up there. We brought it in Bay 2 or something. This is another guy. And I say, okay, so how long is it going to be? He said, oh, yeah, it won't be long. Yeah, we'll get it. It won't be long. Probably about 3 days. He said, give us a week for sure. He said, because when I dropped it off, it was like a Saturday. He said, let's say Thursday. He said, just say Friday. We'll call you. I said, well, nobody has my number. You know, he's like, oh, well, give me your number. I gave him the number. And he said, oh, yeah, we'll call you. Or just check back. I don't want to take your number. Just check back. So I'm like, all right. So I drop off the car, and I didn't think it through. I was young. I didn't think any of this stuff through. I didn't have a ride away from this place. So I called my buddy and say, man, can you scoop me up real quick? Because he didn't live that far from me. He said, yeah, I got to drop my kids off school. Then I'm going to come back. And he was older than me, of course. Well, I'm saying, of course, but he was probably like 25. So he had kids that were in like elementary or whatever, which you could probably be younger than that and still have kids. But anyway, he came and got me. And he was like, yeah, he said, they're going to hook you up. I was like, all right. So needless to say, they get the motor in. I'm trying to shorten this up some. They get the motor in. I get there. It's running. I'm like, yo, this worked. I drive off. I'm driving fast. It's got a little pull to it. And then I go back because I don't like how the pedal feels. The pedal feels soft like or whatever, but the spring was, some with the spring and the throttle that was on the carburetor. So they adjusted that, and then they made it stiff, and I felt like I'm riding around, and I'm happy now. Go to work, got my car. I literally had the car for about 2 weeks, and then that motor started knocking. I went through the whole thing all over again, paid another $100 to get another motor, got another motor. Then that motor started knocking. The warranty that Ray had was like, well, you can bring it back. We won't charge you labor. So the first time I paid the $100. The second time I paid the $100. The third time I just paid $50. Put another motor in there. The fourth time I came back again, paid $50. Put another motor. Now by this time I done got too many tows. So now my tow card is, I done went past my tows. Now I got to pay money for the tows. So even though I'm paying $50 to, for the warranty, I guess, or whatever, the warranty that he giving me for this motor, put another motor in, I'm paying $150 for them to tow the car from wherever it stopped at to this shop for them to do it all over again. It was a huge, huge inconvenience. Altogether, I probably spent about $1,300-$1,400. Not just with him, but just back and forth. Keep giving him these 50s. And then I gradually realized that I was being treated like a crackhead because that's how the dope game works. We sell you this dope and we make our money on the comeback. And that's what Ray was doing. He could charge $100, but he know you're going to come back at some point. And he say, oh, well, you got a warranty, but it's $50 just for the label. We'll get you another motor and put it in. So every time I was coming back it was 50, 50, 50. Meanwhile, I'm over here. Um, meanwhile, I'm over here getting tolls now. You know, I had a couple of free tolls, with the card, and then I went over too many tolls. Now I'm paying 150, 120, 130, and I'm steady dishing out money. So I ended up spending it was a little over $1,000 with him. And then my stepfather finally, he's laughing at me. He finally says, "Are you done playing, or do you want to go on and get a motor now?" I say, "I can't afford it. I done spent thousands with this dude now." And the motor had went out again. And I didn't even get it towed because it broke down at work. And I just told the people at my job, I was like, "Yo, the car out there." And they was cool. They was like, "You can leave it there." So I'm like, "Man, I said, man, I don't know what to do, man." I said, "I don't want to get it towed back to him again because it's going to be the same thing over again. It's $50 and I got to get it paid to get it towed there. Then it's $50 again. And then they put another motor in that's going to last 2-3 weeks, a month. I think the longest motor it had, it lasted a month." So I was like, "Man, I can't keep doing this." So he says, "Don't worry about it." He said, "I got a buddy." This is my stepfather. He said, "I got a buddy. He's got a motor." And I think it was an Oldsmobile 403. It was a big motor. I said, "Will that fit in my car?" He said, "Yeah, it'll fit in your car." He said, "We're going to take the motor and the transmission." And I said, "Man, well, how much does he want for this motor and transmission?" And he said, $300. I said, $300? I mean, this deal was 100. This over here, 300. I said, "Yo, man, I can't. Come on, man, $300. That mean that ain't gonna work, Because by this time, I feel like I'm an expert in you get what you pay for. But this was the exception to the rule. He's like, "Nah, man, it's a good car. It's a good car, but you got to buy the whole car." I said, "What does the whole car cost?" He said, $300. I said, "Does it run?" He said, "The motor, everything runs." He said, "He's just not driving the car." And it came out of it was an Oldsmobile. It came out of a 1978 Delta 88, and it had a 403 motor in it. It was a box car. I remember it was like green looking, and it was kind of like in some bushes to the back of the house in the alley a little bit. And it had like daddy long legs, the little spiders all over the motor. And I was like, "There's no way this thing worked." He was like, "No, it worked." Pulled up, jumped the battery in it. He jumped the battery in the car and he started. And it barely started. You turn the key, it was just like boom, and it just started up and it was humming. And I was like, "Yo, that's crazy." So paid the $300, paid the towing to get the car to my stepfather's shop, paid the towing to get my car to my stepfather's shop. So that was like 200 some bucks. And then I paid the three some. All together in a nutshell, I was out of money wise, I was out about $2,000 with everything. But needless to say, my stepfather did it. He was able to take that motor and that transmission out of there and just, scooped it out of there and scooped it right into my Cutlass, got everything straight. And I was driving around with a 403 under the hood of this Cutlass now. And it was fast. It was extremely fast. I said, "Yo, I got to make this more of a sport." So I got me some rally wheels and got some duals with the glass pack. And now I'm zooming all around town. And everybody like, "Man, he got something under the hood," because it was so fast and I was happy. But I had spent $2,000 in totality. I spent all of this money for going back and forth and a huge inconvenience and the mental stress. And it was just absolutely horrible. But in the end, I had this fast car and it was running and everything was great. And needless to say, I ended up wrecking the car and totaled it. So I had it a good 2 months, 3 months before I told him, "Hey, I was 19 years old driving this fast car with rally wheels and running. Come on, man. I'm supposed to wreck that car. I'm supposed to wreck it and total it. That's what's supposed to happen." So, but yeah, that's what ended up happening. That was my very first lesson in you get what you pay for. While I'm trying to go the cheap way and being desperate and trying to do this, I end up losing in the end. I end up spending all kind of money, all kind of inconvenience when I could have just took that. I could have just saved up $2,000 or or 2,500 or whatever it was to get the rebuild motor and did it in one go. But instead, I went through the whole inconvenience and I learned my lesson. And this is a story I've told my kids, and so they'll know you get what you pay for. Sometimes it's just worth paying the price for it, just the convenience of it. I got a lot of stories that you get what you pay for, but that's one that was my first time and my first lesson, and I learned a lot from that. But I think it's just part of growing up and being a young man and learning lessons and becoming an adult and an older man where you can pass those lessons on to your kids. But yeah, that's my first time, my first lesson in getting what I pay for. So maybe this story could resonate with other people, and then they can understand where I'm coming from and learn a lesson from it themselves. But again, like, comment, share, subscribe. The likes don't cost anything, so do it anyway. Even if you don't like the show, even if you didn't like the story, hit like anyway. It helps the algorithm. It'll help where other people can see the show and maybe they'll like the story. Because I'll tell some stories about myself. I'll talk about entertainment news. I'll talk about local news, just different things I'm gonna talk about at the show. And I think I'm gonna get to the point of doing like some reaction videos. I'm not gonna do a lot of them, but periodically I'm gonna start doing some reaction videos. So you gotta like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you could be the first to know when I upload new content. Please like, please subscribe. Hopefully I can get a part of the algorithm where everything get to flowing, because I got a lot of content. I got a lot of stories. I've lived a long life, so I've been through a lot of stuff, a lot of things going on. So I got a lot of stuff to talk about. But yeah, please like, share, subscribe, follow the show on Instagram, follow on TikTok, hit the Cash App. It's your boy, Carlito Monroe. Peace.